8 justices voted to destroy one of the most powerful gun protection laws in American history. And the one person who was supposed to fix it after the vote made a promise, looked gun owners in the eye, and then did absolutely nothing. Quick question before we continue. Are you subscribed to this channel? Because what I'm about to walk you through could directly affect how your gun rights are protected in your state right now. Hit that subscribe button. 90% of gun owners miss legal updates like this one, and I don't want you to be in that group. Hit subscribe, then let's get into this. Okay, so let's start from the very beginning, because to understand how bad this situation really is, you need to know the full story. And trust me, by the time we reach the end of this video, you are going to be shocked. Back in 2021, the state of Missouri did something that gun owners all across the country were cheering about. Missouri passed a law called the Second Amendment Preservation Act. Most people just call it SAPA. Now, this was not a small law. This was a bold, aggressive law that said in plain terms, Missouri state officers, local police, and government officials are not allowed to help federal agents enforce federal gun laws that Missouri believes violate the Second Amendment. Think about what that means for a second. Federal agents trying to enforce certain gun rules inside Missouri would basically be on their own. They couldn't call the local sheriff. They couldn't get help from state police, no state resources, no state manpower, nothing. But SAPA went even further than that. The law also created what is called a civil remedy. That's a legal term, so let me explain it in plain English. It means any regular Missouri resident could actually sue a Missouri official or officer if that official helped the federal government enforce a gun law that Missouri considered unconstitutional. And to make sure people took it seriously, the penalty was $50,000. That's not a typo, $50,000 per violation. This was one of the strongest Second Amendment protection laws in American history. Gun owners loved it. Gun rights groups celebrated it. And the federal government absolutely hated it. Here's what happened next. The Biden administration, through the Department of Justice, filed a lawsuit against Missouri. They said SAPA was unconstitutional. They argued it violated something called the Supremacy Clause. The Supremacy Clause basically means federal law is the boss. When state law and federal law conflict, federal law wins. The Biden DOJ said Missouri was trying to cancel federal law, and they were going to stop it. The federal district court agreed with the Biden administration. The judge struck down Missouri's SAPA law in its entirety. Every single part of it, gone. Missouri did not give up. They appealed the decision and asked the Supreme Court of the United States for an emergency stay. An emergency stay, in simple terms, means the Supreme Court temporarily holds everything in place while the legal fight continues. Missouri was saying, hey, Supreme Court, please let our law stay alive while we fight this battle. And here's where the 8-1 number comes in. When the Supreme Court reviewed Missouri's emergency request, 8 justices voted no. Only 1 justice voted yes. That 1 justice was Justice Clarence Thomas. He was the only one willing to stand with Missouri and allow SAPA to survive while the case moved forward. Every other justice on that court voted against Missouri's law staying in effect. That is a devastating vote. When you lose 8-1 at the Supreme Court, it does not look good for your case. But wait, there is something even more important that most people are not talking about. If you're finding this helpful so far, imagine what else you will learn from this channel. My next video is going to cover the exact words you should say when a police officer asks if you are carrying a firearm. That one video could protect you from a serious legal mistake. Subscribe right now so you do not miss it when it drops. All right, now we move into the part of this story that really gets crazy. After the Supreme Court denied that emergency stay, the case went back down to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. The 8th Circuit looked at everything and agreed with the lower court. They struck down SAPA again. Same result. Missouri's law was dead, at least for now. Missouri was not finished fighting, though. They went back to the Supreme Court. This time, they filed what is called a petition for certiorari. That is a formal legal request asking the Supreme Court to take the full case, hear all the arguments, and issue a final decision. Gun owners everywhere were watching to see if the Supreme Court would agree to hear the case. Now, here is where the Trump administration enters the story, and this is where the betrayal starts. A lot of gun owners felt a sense of hope. This was a different administration. This was supposedly a pro-gun administration. Surely the Trump DOJ would take Missouri's side and help save SAPA, right? Here's what actually happened. The Trump DOJ did not fully support Missouri's SAPA law. They continued to maintain that SAPA was unconstitutional, but they did something that looked, at first, like a compromise. When Missouri's petition reached the Supreme Court, the Trump DOJ made a specific promise to the justices. The DOJ told the Supreme Court this exact thing. They said, if you deny Missouri's petition and send this case back to the lower court, we will acquiesce in narrowing the scope of the judgment. That is their exact language. In plain English, the DOJ was telling the Supreme Court, if you reject Missouri's appeal, we will go back to the district court, and we will agree to remove at least some. parts of the broad injunction that the Biden administration got. We will not enforce the full block that was put in place. The Supreme Court heard that promise. The Supreme Court considered it. And then the Supreme Court denied Missouri's petition. That denial is essentially the 8-1 vote you're hearing about. The court sent the case back to the lower courts, and the injunction blocking SAPA stayed in place. Now, quick legal note. This is educational information only, not legal advice. Always talk to a qualified attorney about your specific situation. Gun laws vary dramatically by state and by circumstance. Never rely on a YouTube video alone to make legal decisions. Now, here's the part that should make every gun owner sit up straight and pay attention. After the Supreme Court denied the petition and sent the case back to the lower courts, the DOJ was supposed to go to the district court and narrow that injunction. They made that promise to the highest court in the land. And then they did nothing. Absolutely nothing. No motion was filed to narrow the injunction. No steps were taken to release any part of the block on SAPA. The Trump Department of Justice told 9 Supreme Court justices that they would narrow the judgment. The Supreme Court took them at their word and denied Missouri's appeal. And then the DOJ just walked away from that promise. Here is what most people get wrong when they hear this story. They think it is just a Missouri problem. It is not. This has consequences for every single state that is trying to pass similar laws to protect gun owners from federal overreach. Think about this. Missouri spent years fighting for SAPA. Governors signed it. State legislators voted for it. Gun owners across the state celebrated it. And then it got struck down. The Supreme Court refused to save it. And the one administration that was supposed to be on the side of gun owners made a promise to fix part of the damage and then broke that promise without explanation. Hey, real quick. 73% of people watching this video right now are not subscribed to this channel. That means almost 3 out of every 4 of you are going to miss the next critical gun law update I release. Do not be in that group. Join the 50,000 gun owners who get these updates first by hitting that subscribe button right now. Now, let me explain why the DOJ's broken promise matters so much beyond just Missouri. When the Trump DOJ made that promise to the Supreme Court, they were not just promising Missouri something. They were making a representation to the highest court in the entire country. And when you tell the Supreme Court of the United States that you're going to do something, and then you do not do it, that erodes trust. It also leaves gun owners in a very difficult position. Here is a hypothetical example to explain this. Imagine a state passes a law saying local police do not have to assist federal agents in enforcing a specific federal gun regulation. The federal government sues. The court strikes it down with a broad injunction. The state appeals. The federal government says, don't worry, if you drop the appeal, we'll narrow the punishment. The state backs off. And then the federal government does nothing. Now the state is stuck. The broad injunction is still in place. The punishment is still fully intact. And the appeal is gone. That is essentially what happened to Missouri. They are left with a dead law, a full injunction, and a broken promise from the very administration they thought was on their side. But here's the part that gives gun owners some reason to hope. Missouri is not sitting still. In 2025, the Missouri House voted to reenact a version of SAPA, not an identical copy of the original, but a modified version that tries to address the concerns raised by the federal courts. The state is essentially saying, okay, the courts told us where the line is. Now we are going to write a new law that gets as close to that line as legally possible without crossing it. Whether that new version survives legal challenges remains to be seen. But the fight is not over. The case is also still alive in the lower courts. That means there is still a chance that future legal proceedings could change the outcome. The case is not completely finished. It is just in a very difficult position right now. Here's what you need to understand as a gun owner watching this. The Second Amendment fight is not a single battle. It is a long war. Laws get passed, laws get struck down, promises get made, promises get broken. The only way gun owners win in the long run is by staying informed, staying engaged, and never assuming that any administration will automatically protect your rights without pressure and accountability. This information could change fast. New rulings could come down, new promises could be made or broken, and the landscape of gun law in this country could look completely different by early 2026. Subscribe to this channel right now because the next video I am releasing explains exactly what you need to know before the next major deadline hits. You do not want to be the person who finds out about a critical gun law change after it has already affected you. Let me bring this all together for you before we close out. Here's the key takeaway from everything we covered today. Missouri built one of the strongest Second Amendment protection laws in America. The federal government fought it, the court struck it down, and the Supreme Court voted 8-1 to let that strike down stand. The Trump Department of Justice made a formal promise to the Supreme Court to narrow the punishment after the case went back to the lower courts. That promise was not kept. Missouri is now fighting back with a new version of the law, and the case is still moving through the legal system. This story is not over, but right now, gun owners in Missouri and across the country are watching closely to see if promises will ever be turned into action. If this video gave you value, do me one favor, hit that subscribe button right now. I'm not just asking for a number. I am asking you to make sure that the next time something this big happens in the world of gun law, you hear about it here first, and not after it is already too late. Gun owners who stay informed are gun owners who stay free. That is what this channel is all about. This video is for educational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Laws vary by jurisdiction and circumstances. Always consult a licensed attorney for guidance specific to your situation.